Hello there and welcome back to Forza Top Gear Lap's Rivals, the spin-off where we pit a couple of cars with common ground and close PIs against each other to see which one comes out on top. Today we take a look at the two top dogs in the American car food chain. This is the Super Muscle Showdown of Corvette versus Viper. Firstly, the Chevrolet Corvette. An American icon, the Corvette has been in production since 1953 and has since gone through 8 generations. Today we focus on the 4th generation Corvette, known simply as the C4. The C4 was launched in 1984 and would see a heavy change from the previous generation Corvette. The C4 was designed to be a much more modern car, with a completely new chassis, sleeker styling and several other improvements. The C4 would see a shift to a focus on handling and braking. The new car would handle much better than its predecessor, but the straight line speed was lacking, with max power being 250 horsepower from the L98 V8. It would take until 1990 for this high performance model to come along, and it's safe to say it was worth the wait. Known as the ZR1, it was built in collaboration with the then General Motors owned Lotus. The design brief was simple: to make one of the world's fastest cars. This meant changing almost every component. The brakes and steering were uprated, the suspension came from Bilstein and was dialed in by the Lotus Formula 1 team, even featuring adjustable dampers, along with specially made Goodyear tyres. The true advantage of the ZR1 came under the bonnet though. Dubbed LT5, this V8 used parts from the L98, but it was completely overhauled. All aluminium with 4 camshafts and 32 valves along with adjustable intake runners. Finally, the C4 had the cutting-edge engine it needed to compete with the top-tier sports cars of the world. It would be much more expensive than the base C4, but it was a lot quicker, 0 to 60 in around 4.5 seconds, and a top speed of 186 miles per hour. Some serious figures back then, making it indeed one of the world's fastest buyable cars. Despite the huge performance, it wasn't a big seller, with buyers opting for more premium cars from brands like Porsche. It also wasn't popular with GM executives due to its amount of bespoke parts. The next fast Corvette, the 5th generation Z06, would be much closer to the original car and would be developed all in-house. Despite this though, the ZR1 is a very special car in the history of the Corvette, and its name would go on to be the crowning name in the world of Corvette, most recently appearing on the track-slaying 755 horsepower ZR1 C7 Corvette. Next up, the Dodge Viper. Even almost 30 years later, it's hard to believe the Dodge Viper became a real car. Designed as a modern-day homage to the legendary Shelby Cobra, the crowning piece of the Dodge Viper was its massive 8-litre V10 engine. Developed in part with Lamborghini, who were owned by Chrysler at the time, it's not a stretch to say the car was built around the engine. Launched in 1992, the Viper would gain a reputation for taking no prisoners. With no ABS or traction control, it was all on you and the massive tyres to keep the 400 horsepower rear-wheel drive monster in check. In 1996, Dodge would unveil the 2nd generation model, now featuring the option for a coupe called the GTS. Featuring more power and airbags for some peace of mind, this made the Viper more popular, and in 1999 Dodge launched this, the ACR. Designed to cater to the track day enthusiast, the ACR saw a reduction to the weight via removal of items such as the air conditioning, a slight boost in power through a new intake, and adjustable suspension, along with new 18-inch BBS wheels wrapped in even wider tyres. The ACR would be known as a formidable track weapon, if you were brave enough. The ACR was one of the fastest cars for the track at the time, not entirely unlike how this generation Viper would dominate motorsports for several years, racking up 163 wins as the Viper GTS-R. The ACR name would be used for subsequent track special Vipers, with those going on to be at the top tier of track day cars, featuring massive aero packages and a big focus on downforce. The Viper would continue on for 5 generations and stay in production for 25 years, until 2017, going out with its signature V10 and now bored out to a colossal 8.4 litres. While the death of the Viper was incredibly sad, it's still hard to believe it ever existed at all. So there you go, 2 great American icons, but which will win? An American with some British overthinking, or an American with some Italian flamboyancy? Let's find out. On to the track then, and the first car of today was the 1995 Chevrolet Corvette ZR1, 405 horsepower, 385 foot-pounds torque, 3,505 pounds of weight. Compared to the Viper, this one is the underdog. It is down on power, down on torque, and it is very, very slightly heavier. But yeah, perhaps that's unsurprising. The C4 Corvette, I mean, I won't be around the bush on this one. It is my favourite generation of Corvette. I just love the styling of it for whatever reason. I also quite like some of the sort of weird 80s and 90s futuristic attempts made with this car, with some of the digital dash components and stuff like that. I think it's quite cool. And the ZR1 for me, this is a fantastic car. I think it's got a great story, tons of personality. It's got the handling and braking advantage that, you know, the Americans were really looking ahead with this version of the Corvette, focusing more on handling and braking. And again, the LT5 V8 is also a very excellent engine. As far as it goes to drive, perhaps unsurprisingly considering its age, it does feel a little bit lazy, but it is still a very, very good car to drive compared to, you know, some European and Japanese sports cars all the time. This still feels just as good as they do. It doesn't feel quite as good as I remember historically in Forza games. I've always found the C4 ZR1 to be an absolutely exquisite handling car. Wasn't quite the case this time around. It does feel a little bit lazy, a little bit more dumbed down. But it's still an excellent car nonetheless. Next up, 1999 Dodge Viper GTS ACR, 460 horsepower, 500 foot-pound torque, 3,450 pounds of weight. As we previously mentioned, this car is up on power. It is definitely up on torque. 115 more torques in the Viper, and it is a very, very slight bit lighter, but of course being a Viper it could be a little bit more unwieldy. The C4 is a bit more sort of surgically precise, the Viper not so much because of that giant engine. Still though, ACR Vipers historically around this track have done excellent. Currently in 32nd place we have the 2016 model, and in 44th place we have the 2008 model. This car's not going to be quite up there with those because they have the huge aero packages and of course they're a lot more modern and so on. But this car still could put up a pretty good fight. As far as it goes to drive, this really was a very, very great car to drive. It does feel a little bit floaty, perhaps, you know, the suspension does feel a bit more aged, especially over the Corvette as well, which is actually quite stiff. But it still is pretty good. It's a very fast car even by today's standards, you know, 460 horsepower on a relatively light car. It still does feel pretty quick. Yeah, overall pretty good car. Both of them are absolutely great cars to drive, there's no denying that. The Corvette is a little bit more stable, the Viper does feel a little bit quicker. But what do the times say? Well, the winner of this showdown was the Viper, going into 121st place with a 120.377, a pretty darn good time. It does beat out a modern day Bentley Continental Super Sports, goes in between sort of two super saloons as well, the E63 and RS6 Avant respectively. Yeah, really not a bad showing from the Viper, but equally not a bad showing from the ZR1. 136th place with 121.077. It does get beat out by the Viper, but interestingly, it is very slightly quicker than the Z06 that replaced it, the C5 Corvette. It's also quicker than Lotus's own Esprit V8. It's just behind a Dodge Demon. You know, the C4 Corvette is still a very, very quick car, even by today's standards, both of them are. As far as it comes down to choosing which one, honestly, I really can't choose. I love the Viper, I love the craziness of the 8-litre V10. Again, I still can't quite get around the fact that they made it. You know, this was Chrysler that came out with millions of concept cars, and not a lot of them went through production, but amazingly the Viper did. And the ZR1 Corvette, I just love it. I love the swoopy design, I love some of the futuristic attempts they made with it, I love the colour palette, which it definitely gets one up on the Viper with, the colour selection. Honest to God, I can't choose between the two cars. If I wanted a more focused car for the track, I'd probably choose the Corvette. If I wanted a bit more fun, I'd choose the Viper. That's probably the best solution you're going to get out of me. But please tell me down below in the comment section which one you prefer between the Viper and the Corvette. Join us for the next main episode of Forza Top Gear Laps, which is going to focus on modern sports cars. And join us next time on Forza Top Gear Laps Rivals, when we're going to be taking a look at two British hypercars from two different decades. Join us for that. Until then, farewell.